Suppose if I want to use readline method or function in my program, then this is the syntax I'm going to have. When I talk about variables, there are three types of variables, that is instance variable, class variable, as well as local variable. These are the three different types of variables we are going to use in our Java programming. Hello to all, a warm welcome to my new session on constants, variables, data types. I'm Revati from the Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram, First Grade College, Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. So dear student, before going to start my today's session, let me to recall the things what I have discussed in my previous session of this chapter. So at the beginning, I started with what is constants, what is variables, as well as what is data type and the different type of data types, that is primitive as well as non-primitive. Then I discussed integer data type as well as floating point data type. So these are the topic I discussed in my previous session of this chapter. But in my today's session, I'm going to deal with declaration of variables, giving values to variables, assignment statement, as well as how to read input, that is read statement. Anyway, student, please make a note here because these are the very important topic to start with your programming. Now, declaration of variables. So, how to declare variables, and if I declare the variables, what is going to happen? For example, if I write int a, so this is nothing but the declaration of variables. So the statement indicates that it tells the compiler about what the variable name is. So here, what is this a? That is nothing but the variable name. Now it specifies what type of data variable. If I consider this example, it's going to specify the compiler that it is integer type data. Then the place of declaration decides the scope of the variable. For example, if I consider variables, there are two types of variable scope, that is local variable as well as global. So dear student, what is local here? Here local is nothing but within the block. Then what about global? That is throughout the program. So variables are accessed within the block, then it is local variable. Then what is global? Variables are accessed throughout the programs are called global variables. So the name, that is variable, must be declared. That means before going to use that variables, it must be declared. For example, think that I'm going to use b, that is variable name b in my program. But if I forget to declare, then what's going to happen? I'm going to get the error message, that is variable does not declared. Now a variable must declared before it used in the program. And the student, variables are used to store the value. Okay, it is always going to point the memory. So a variable can be used to store the value of any data type. So these are the few things we have to follow while declaring variables as well as while using variables. Now, the general form of a variable. So, what is variable? That is the name to the memory location. Now, how to define the variable? First, I'm going to have the data types. Then, I'm going to specify the variable name. So if I'm having more than one variables in my program, then how to differentiate? I'm going to use the comma. A declaration statement must be end with the semicolon. So if I write any declaration statement, for example, int a comma b comma c, and it must be end with the semicolon in order to indicate this is the end of the line. Now, giving values to variable. So how can I give the values? How can I assign the values to the variable? So variable must be given a value after it has been declared. For example, if I write int a, then I must want to give the values to this variable. That can be done by using an assignment as well as read statement. That means directly assigning the value, and another way, read from the keyboard. Now, these are the two ways used to give or specify the values to the variable. Now, so dear student, if I go with the first type, that is by using an assignment statement, then a easy method of entering or giving values to a variable is through the assignment statement. So here, how to assign the value? First, I'm going to have the variable name, then assign the value. For example, if I write int a equal to 100, then this is the example for assigning values. So this is the example, that is initial value 0 as well as final value 100. Now, another type, that is read statement. By using read line statement, I can able to read the input from the keyboard. So the read line method reads the input from the keyboard as a string, then converted into corresponding data type. For example, if I use read line method in my program, it's going to read the input, and whatever the input read, that is in the form of string. Now I want to convert that into particular data type, and here I'm going to have the example. So suppose if I want to use readline method or function in my program, then this is the syntax I'm going to have, that is public final string, this readline method, and it throws IO, that is input output exception. So this is the syntax I'm going to have to use my readline method in my program. Now along with that, I can able to have some other reading methodology. That means I can able to read the input from the keyboard by using some other methodology, that is by using console class. So what is console? That is nothing but the input output console. Now to read means what? Input console, and where I'm going to have in my package, that is system. Now one more thing I'm going to have used to read the input from the keyboard, that is scanner class. Even I can able to use buffered reader class. So anyway, dear student, we are going to study all these methods in depth in my upcoming session. But according to today's session, you just want to remember where and when to use console, scanner as well as buffered methods. That is to read the input. I'm going to have console, scanner as well as reader class. Now I'm going to have scope of the variables. Till now we were discussing about variables, how to read the variables. Now I'm going to discuss about the scope of the variables. When I talk about variables, there are three types of variables, that is instance variable, class variable, as well as local variable. So what is instance? There is nothing but the object. Objects are itself called instance. So instant variables means what? When the objects are initialized, then it is called instance variable. And if the objects are initialized within the class, then it is inner class. Then if the objects are initialized outside the class, then it is treated as outer class. And the scope of the instance variables are depends on the objects initialized within the class or without the class, that is outside of the class. Now, what is class variable? That is nothing but the variables which is used in the class. So for example, if I write class student, and if I write int roll number, then if I write character name of, then these things are called class variables. That means I'm going to declare the variable within the class. And what about local variable? For example, think that I'm going to have the methods. Within the method, suppose if I write the, so dear student, if I declare the variables within the function or method, then it is termed as local variable. For example, think that I'm going to have add function. Okay, and if I write int a comma b, then this is the example for local variables. And the scope of the variables are within the function. And if I consider class variable, the scope of the variables are within the class. And these are the three different types of variables we are going to use in our Java programming. Now, symbolic constant. So if I consider constant, I'm going to have the type called symbolic constant, may appear repeatedly in a number of places in a program. Now, the total number of students whose marks are analyzed by test analysis program. Now, what is symbolic constant? There are certain type. We are going to use symbolic constant in our program, and it is going to happen most frequently. Now, for example, if I consider grade of a student, so if I consider grade of a student, then I'm going to have grade A, grade B, grade C. So these are the constant value, and these are the symbolic constant. Now, the total number of students whose mark sheet are analyzed by a test analyzing program. There are two problems in the program, that is problem in modification of the problem in understanding the problem. That means while analyzing student report, we are going to come across two type of problem, that is problem in modification of the program. That means it's very difficult to modify the program, and it's very difficult to understand the program. So dear student, to overcome this kind of problems, we are going to use symbolic constant. So it is defined in the program and it is referred throughout the program. Now let me to discuss what is typecasting and what is the need of typecasting. So here, if I consider some program, I want to convert the data type into another data type, that is implicitly or explicitly. So sometime in program there appears situation where there is a need to store a value one type into another. For example, think that I'm going to have floating point value. Okay, now I want to store this floating point into integer. So I'm going to convert one data type to another data type. For that, we are going to have the typecasting. So user must cast the value to be stored by the proceeding it with the name of the parenthesis. For example, think that I'm going to have integer value. For example, say it is 10. Now I want to convert this to floating point. So here I want to write float of 10. That means I'm going to convert this 10 to floating point. That is nothing but 10.00. The process of converting one data type to another data type is known as casting. So it is the process of converting one data type to another data type is called casting, and here we are going to have the example. Before that, I'm going to have syntax. So data type, variable name, specify the type, specify the variable. For example, here I'm going to have integer data type m and I'm going to store 50. Now I want to convert this 50 to float or byte. So here I'm going to write the byte. This is the way I can able to convert one data type to another data type. Now I'm going to have automatic. So what is automatic? Explicit conversion. Here it is implicit conversion. I'm going to convert it. Okay, I'm going to make the conversion. But if I consider automatic conversion, it is possible to assign a value of one type to another of a different without any cast. So it's possible to assign the value without knowing to the user, and that can be done by the compiler. Now Java does the conversion of assigning values automatically. So Java compiler is responsible for converting one type to another automatically, and this is known as automatic type conversion. Automatic type conversion is possible only if the destination type has enough precision to store the source code. That means the destination variable must have enough storage space to store the value. The process of assigning a smaller type to a larger type is known as widening or promotion, and that of assigning a larger type to smaller than narrowing. For example, think that if I'm having float, I'm having float data type. Okay, now for float, if I'm assigning integer data type, and this kind of conversion is called widening. So I'm going to have the larger space. For that, I'm going to assign smaller value. And if I consider another way, that is I'm going to have the int as well as I'm going to have the float. Now see here int holds 2 byte, here it is 4 byte. But I'm going to convert this float to int and I'm going to store it here. And this kind of conversion is called narrowing. Okay, so Java supports automatic type conversion, and which are the two type of automatic type conversion? That is widening as well as narrowing. Now getting values of variables. A computer program is written to manipulate a given set of data and display or print the value. Now, till now we were discussing about how to read the input. Now, how to display the output, how to print the result, how to show the result. So to display or print the result, we are going to have many built-in methods. Java supports two output methods that can be used to send the data to result to the screen. So it is system.println. It's mainly used to display the output. How I'm going to display? That is system.println. But what about reading? That is reader class. To display, I'm going to have writer class. Then I'm going to have buffered output. Once again, to display the output. To read, buffered input. What about write? It is buffered output. If I consider reader class or read line, then I'm going to have write line. Writer class, reader class. Similarly, okay, Java supports some method to display the output to the user. So this is all about how to use the variables, how to read the input and how to display the output to the user. So read line, then it is write line. Then if I'm having buffered input reader, then I'm going to have buffered output reader. So dear student, if I want to output the data, then I'm having reader class as well as writer class. And if I consider buffered input or buffered output, once again I'm going to have to read the input as well as read the output. Even I'm going to have console output class to output or display the data to the user. So this is all about today's session. But in my next session, I'm going to deal with arithmetic expression, relational operators, logical operators, assignment operators, increment operators, as well as conditional operators, bitwise operators, as well as special operators. That means I'm going to deal with operators in my next session. So dear student, I hope in my today's session you got more information about constants, variables as well as data types. Let's meet in the next session with some more information about Java programming. Until then, keep watching and keep learning. Thank you.